All right, boys and girls, this is Mrs. Sharpley, and today we're talking about the Civil War. We're going to read this passage a few times, so if you just kind of stick with me as we read it each time. I have not glued my passage into my notebook yet. We're going to use some colored pencils later on, and the colored pencils really just don't show up very well once we've glued paper down, so we'll hold off on that part. The Civil War. Fighting with your brother is something that happens all the time in most houses. But then, by dinner, everyone is all smiles. However, in 1861, the Civil War had brothers fighting in a war against each other. After Abraham Lincoln was elected president, 11 southern states withdrew or seceded from the United States. The southern states formed the Confederate Army. These Confederate troops wore gray uniforms, and they supported slavery. The remaining states fought to preserve an undivided United States. These troops wore blue uniforms and were known as Union soldiers. Union soldiers were mostly white Northerners, but there also were many free black and ex-slaves in the Union. In 1865, the war ended and the North had won. All right, so we're going to be looking at inference first, which is it wants us to reread the last sentence and what inference can you make about why free black ex-slaves were part of the Union. For key details, it says based on the text, what was the purpose of the Civil War? And for compare and contrast, it wants us to compare and contrast Union soldiers and the Confederate soldiers. Use details from the text. All right, so for inference, we're going to do 1 in red. And for key details, we'll do 2 in green. And for compare and contrast, we will do 3 in blue. All right, we're going to save inference for last. And as I'm reading it the second time, I'm going to look at information that I feel is important details. And then I'm also going to be looking at something that would help us with the compare and contrast for Union and Confederate soldiers. So when it's talking about those as individuals and how they might be different, I'm going to kind of pay extra close attention to that. All right, so fighting with your brother is something that happens all the time in most houses. But then by dinner, everyone is all smiles. However, in 1861, the Civil War had brothers fighting in a war against each other. After Abraham Lincoln was elected president, 11 southern states withdrew or seceded from the United States. All right, we'll stop there just for right now because that's giving us some information that I feel like are key details. Again, based on the text, what was the purpose of the Civil War? Why did it happen and what was the result of it? All right, it said that Abraham Lincoln was elected president and 11 southern states withdrew from the United States. So they decided they are no longer part of the United States. They're going to be their own country. The southern states formed the Confederate Army. All right, there's that Confederate Army that we're supposed to be paying a little bit of attention to for the compare and contrast. These Confederate troops wore gray uniforms and they supported slavery. So Confederate, they wore gray uniforms and they supported slavery, which meant that they felt like it was okay and they wanted to continue doing it. The remaining states fought to preserve an undivided United States. Right there, it's talking about our union. They wanted an undivided United States, which means that it wasn't broken up into pieces. They wanted everybody to stay together. These troops wore blue uniforms and were known as the Union soldiers. Union soldiers were mostly white Northerners, but there also were many free black and ex-slaves in the Union. In 1865, the war ended and the North had won. So the fact that the North won is an important piece there. All right. Now for inferencing, it wanted us to reread the last sentence. What inference can you make about why free black and ex-slaves were part of the Union? So here, let's see our last sentence. really start, well, that's not surely where they want us to start. We will go from right here. All right. It says Union soldiers were mostly white Northerners, but also were many free black and ex-slaves in the Union. In 1865, the war ended and the North had won. All right. So we have those free black and ex-slaves in that Union. A little bit higher, it had said that the Confederate troops wore gray uniforms and they supported slavery. So the Confederates felt like slavery was okay, whereas your Union felt like it needed to stop. So that makes sense that you would have free black and ex-slaves that were fighting against the Confederate Army that wanted to keep slavery. So we're going to say that the Confederate troops, they supported slavery is going to be a little bit of a helper right there because, of course, ex-slaves and free blacks are going to want to fight against a group that felt like it was okay. All right, so now we're going to use scissors to cut up our page on the dotted lines. And then when it comes to gluing, we are going to glue on the side that has our text. All right. All right. Now as you continue, you're going to do a little bit on your own, but you'll want to make sure you listen to my directions. The inference, you're going to put why you think that those free blacks and ex-slaves were fighting with the Union, and you'll answer behind here. Your key details, based on the text, what was the purpose of the Civil War? So why do you think the Civil War happened, and what was the outcome? And you'll answer it there. Now for the compare and contrast piece, you're supposed to be comparing the Union and Confederate soldiers. So we're actually going to take two colored pencils and write Confederate on one side and then we can do Union on the other side. And now we can just add some details for the Confederates and some details for the Union. So that's something you'll do on your own. And then your teacher is giving you some directions on how she wants to show that you've done this work. And have a good day.